Hello and bonjour, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sandra Bender. I'm the Community Engagement and Education Program Coordinator with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. I'm just here to steer the conversation and host our amazing presenters and elder. Just before we get in, I have some housekeeping notes, but before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of many, many peoples and nations, which have existed here since well before the nation of Canada was established, and who continue to exist nonetheless. We are here in a land of many, many waters as well. Here in Winnipeg, which you can see behind me, where the NCTR is located and based, we are here because of the meeting of two of our largest rivers in the city, the Red and the Assiniboine. That is why Winnipeg exists. Winnipeggers drink water that comes from Shoal Lake. We have been drinking that water since the time of World War I, whereas the nations who live along that lake have only just very recently gained access to their water in safe drinkable form. We are here in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 land, the first of the historic treaties who have been signed. We acknowledge that many of Canada's obligations as a treaty partner have not been upheld, continue to not be upheld, and also that many of the First Peoples are not covered under treaty agreements and live on unceded territory. All right, having said that, before I turn it over to Elder Larry, just a few housekeeping notes. You'll note that this is a webinar format, so your own cameras and microphones are not activated. If you have a question for any of the presenters at any point, you will find a Q&A box where you can put those. Zoom has a few different setups, so depending on your screen, you might find that under a button that says More with 3 dots on it. So if you're not seeing that immediately, otherwise it should look like a question mark in a box that says Q&A. We will have 3 presentations from 3 different presenters who are with us today. We're going to save all of our questions for the end. So we have an hour for presentation time and an hour for questions and discussion. So you're welcome to put your question in to the Q&A box at any point that it occurs to you, but I will say we are going to wait until the start of the second hour to get into those. So, secondly, you'll see in the chat here that we have French translation available. To access that, you just need to click on the button that says interpretation. So if at any point there's discussion in French, I will just give a quick verbal translation here in English. But if you are a Francophone, you can stay in the interpretation channel. I hope that makes sense for everyone. That said, we have 2 full hours, which is exciting. This gives us a lot of time to ask some real questions and get some real answers. So I would now like to turn it over to Elder Larry Henneque to give us an opening prayer and comments.
Thank you. When I got up this morning, I looked to the west, or to the east rather, where the sun was coming up. And I realized it was Great Spirit allowing me to see another day. I was very thankful for that. I come from a large family as far as my immediate family. My wife and I, between us, have 8 kids. 8 kids between us. And we have 17 not great, but grandchildren. I'll get this right thing. And we have 3 great-grandchildren and 1 more on the way. And we're very happy and we're excited to welcome the new one into our midst in late September, early October. And so we're always very thankful. We're traveling this time for the next 3 weeks and trying to look at different places, talk to different people, and continue to learn, which is one thing that I would ask for those that are listening, is that you continue to learn. You never give up. You never quit learning. There's always something new out there, some understanding that comes from it. And today, again, we will listen to these 3 presentations and from there, learn what's going on and what we can take from it. In my language, the Cree language, I will say my prayer and I will give you a short version of a translation that I have done in my own language. Another thing that I would say before I start the prayer is that a couple of weeks ago, I got invited to a sweat lodge up in northern Saskatchewan. During that sweat, an elder gave me a Cree name. And with that, now I carry that with me. I still use Lyria Henneque, but my Cree name is Ki Sigma Squa. And the English translation is a bit difficult and long to explain, but the easiest way, and those who live the Cree life will understand when I say red bear. Very proud of it. The elder, after we were done, said it's a very, very good name to give to someone who has spent so much time in education and a career in education. So with that, friends, get to meet people and offer the following. How kasimantu. Kia kahti wegax, kahtiogi wegax kitam, kahtiogi weganagatutam. Tumam situtad, niya, isik mashka. Kanto tawya kanuskagi sagitaya, kanuskagi siga. Ischet kanto ta pawistawa. Stohtamuin. Nagigskagot siya kisa kamiksia kanuskagi siga. Kasimantu. Kia nanaskom. Kia nanaskom. Pipigis noktahi akong matsu ang katawa tes pronunciation. Katawa tes big squat tayo. Yagugin tatamat ng simanto. Wichinan noskagisiga. Miinan stohtamuin. Kia kahtiuway nagskit. Great Spirit, we thank you for this beautiful day. And we ask that you give us some measure of understanding as we go through what we are going through today. We ask that you instill in the 3 presenters the knowledge that they impart is one that will be learned by others who are listening in, Great Spirit. I thank you so much, Great Spirit, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this wonderful thing that's happening, this whole area that needs a serious look at, needs to be continued to look at, that are missing children. Need to be found, Great Spirit. And that the records are kept in 2 languages, as I understand it. There may be more, but we need to look at those records so that we get an understanding and we begin to know where our children are and how we can help to bring them home. There are many ways, and one of them today that we talk about are the French records, and that, Great Spirit, we ask for some measure of understanding.
Thank you, Elder Larry, for these words to start us off in such a beautiful and good way, to set our hearts and minds in the right place to have these discussions. So really, thank you. So now, I would like to invite our first presenter, Jerome Melancon, who's going to introduce himself and speak about his work for about the next 20 minutes or so. Welcome, Jerome.
Thanks, Sandra. Very grateful to have been invited today to be speaking to you. Um, I am speaking to you from Askanaka Sestaki, which is a Cree name for the place where the bones are piled up. There's different interpretations of what that means. Um, the Canadian government called it Regina. It's a very different place than where I might have been beforehand. The bones that have been piled up is a reference to the genocide of the buffalo, um, and the fact that this land was chosen because of the railroad and because of the financial ties between Edgar Dewdney, who was also very closely involved with residential schools. Um, So it's a privilege for me to be speaking about the legacy of residential schools from this territory, which is currently and remains the territory of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, and Nakota nations, as well as the homeland of the Métis, and a place where I've been very fortunate to get to learn quite a bit over the last 9 years that I've been here. Um, it's an obligation, right? It's on our contract. Whenever we share our screen, we have to say, I'm going to share my screen, and so I will share my screen. And um, you'll be able to do more than just look at my face for the next little while, although you can certainly do that if you know how to use those features in Zoom. I want to thank Elder Larry Henneque for those great words that he started us with today. And very happy to hear about um, to have a chance to share here. So just a little bit about me here. I'm originally out from Quebec. I lived a bit all over the place in Canada. I do have a Catholic background, although it's a background and not nothing more than that at this point for me. I do have ties to Treaty 6 territory. Um, and okay, um, just give me a minute here. Okay, and I sorry about that technical difficulty here. I was for a bit. You have a bit of my history here on the screen, and basically. I had been leading research over the previous 10 years of my career around philosophy, political ideas, those kind of things. And I was asked to help Causes First Nation, their research team, their committee, to translate documents from French into English. And so that's what I'll be talking about today, the kind of things that we've learned over the past while. Um, Let me just, okay, try to get a hold of this here. So the first thing I want to go over here is what are we talking about specifically? Um, there's a lot of documents in French. So for those who don't know this yet, I thought I would throw this out just to introduce the issue. Um, the majority of residential schools were administered, run, managed, often created and asked for, requested by the Catholic Church. Most of those, this was done by the Oblates. We'll talk about who they are in a minute. And most of the Oblates were French speakers, whether they're from Quebec or other parts of Canada or from France. They rarely taught, except at the higher levels. Um, but they did focus a lot on teaching and missionary work at the right levels. They taught in English. Most of the documents you have with residential schools that they ran are actually in English because they were meant for the federal government. So that all had to be in English. But whatever was internal, that was all in French. So all the internal documents, and then you'll notice some discrepancies between what's said in French, what's in English, because they're saying it amongst themselves or they're saying it to the outside, right? And any documents that are kept in French are either administrative or private. And so one of the things that we talk about with the communities that we work with is that these documents were not meant to be seen by Indigenous people. Residential school documents in general were not, especially the French ones. Right? So to be able to make them be accessible directly in Indigenous communities is really a great opportunity for us. We're very grateful that we have the chance to play this role. So just to go over the history a little bit to give you a sense of who it is that you might be dealing with if you are dealing with Oblate records, because again, that's mostly the records that you'll find in French. Um, an order within the Catholic Church is like a community. It's a manner of belonging to the church. It's who different priests will and monks will make their vows to. These vows will be different, right? So not everybody makes the same vows. They don't all involve the same things. For instance, a few orders require vows of silence. That's very rare in general, right? So it all depends on the kind of order that we're talking about. The Oblates stand beside others like the Augustinians, and the current Pope, Leo XIV, is Augustinian. Jesuits like Pope Francis, the Marists, and not Marxists, that's a different kind of order. But the Marists are another order as well that often taught and had some implications here and there with residential schools. And then you've got the monastic orders like the Benedictines, Franciscans, Trappists, and this is where you have monks, and they live with an abbot, usually in an abbey, and it's more of a closed-in kind of community. That means that Oblates just belong to the church through the order of the Oblates, and so you've got some of them are priests, some of them are parish priests, so they're actually assigned to a parish, and then priests in general will be called father. And then they can go up in the hierarchy, be bishops, archbishops. Sorry, I've got an extra I in there. They can become cardinal eventually. So you have oblates all over the Catholic Church at all kind of levels of that hierarchy. And you have lay brothers as well, who are just like part of the club, but not as involved. The order itself, when residential schools are created, it's relatively new. It's been around for about 40 years. It's created after the revolution in France because there weren't enough priests anymore. They all had left the orders or been killed or left the country. So they needed more people to evangelize the poor in France. They become a missionary order, which means that they create missions. And then that means that they had to become a teaching order because they had to train their own missionaries. And so in St. Boniface, for instance, they had a scholasticate, they had a generate, and so you could be a student and continue past more or less middle school through all these different institutions, and then become a priest right here in Western Canada, for instance, or all over the country. They've also managed a lot of schools, ran a lot of schools for Kenyans and non-Indigenous Canadians. And so you'll often have the same people who supported Francophone communities and ran Indigenous communities as well. So there's a specific role that the Francophone communities played in residential schools as a result of that. And we can talk about that a bit later if you want as well. Just the structure, how it works in general, because that can get pretty confusing. You'll see talk of provinces often. So this is before Canada had before they were provinces in Canada when they were just really colonies. Orders have provinces, which just means different people look after parts of the world territory, right? So these provinces have nothing to do really with geopolitical borders. They're usually separate from that, although it's often handy to follow those borders as well. You'll have a provincial, right? The père provincial, or provincial father, who is in charge of the province. So that's usually the higher place person in the hierarchy. And then you'll have different positions within the province as well. You'll have a treasurer, for instance. So different people who will have these roles. And that's all parallel to the church hierarchy, where you have the priests and the parish and the bishops and the archbishops and so on. So that's all parallel to each other. It gets pretty complicated, right? these provinces have changed over time. If you look at the documents, some of them out west, I'll give you the prairies for an example here. We'll see documents that mention the Red River province, and then the Manitoba and Alberta provinces are created. That includes two different parts of Saskatchewan. So that's why many documents from Saskatchewan are either in Manitoba or Alberta right now. And now there's only three provinces for all of Canada. So you got them here. It's Le Cap, then Assumption, and Lacombe for the west. Some historians say that the Oblates were first established in Longueuil. Others say it's in Saint-Hubert. It's not that far away from each other anyway, but it's generally on the south shore, southeast of Montreal. So that grows pretty fast. They go from 45 members to 225. Out of those first 45 members, 7 are Canadian, so Canadian born. Alexandre Taché is one of them. If you ever see a Taché Street anywhere in Canada, that's who it's about. Right? He was one of the most important members of the Oblates, one of the architects of the residential school system, one of the great defenders of French Canadians all over the country as well. So he's a hero to some, and really a villain to others. And that's the case again for many of the priests here. They created missions for settlers at first, so that create missions are what's placed where there's no church, where there's no parish, outside of the structures that are clearly laid out within the Oblate order or the Catholic hierarchy in general. So this is where they would hold mass, they would be able to give sacraments, and then this is also where you had a lot of trading posts. And so that's often where the schools were created because there was a lot of traffic there already. So some of them were close to First Nations, to reserves. Many reserves were created close to missions as well because priests were a handy middleman to convert and exert power over indigenous communities. And so you often have these connections, and that's also why often residential schools were so far out of the way because you had missions that were not necessarily close to any one community, but were just handy as a part of the overall system. So they had a lot of residential schools, and they operated 48 over time. But by the time an actual policy around residential schools and the Indian Act were put together, they were already operating many schools, many residential schools. They didn't wait for Canada to create the schools, right? So when you heard the Pope Francis apologize because some of the members of the church took part in the government's plan to assimilate, that's not entirely true because they were doing this, they were creating these schools long before the government ever did, right? So there's some playing with truth and facts and details here that I'm not going to get into. So what documents are we talking about? It's the Oblates documents. They're all administrative documents. You've got official documents like the codices or the codex, if you have just one, that can be up to 500 pages. It's like almost a guest book, right? Who's coming around, who's leaving. So what are the main events in the history of the mission and or of the school? You'll have lists of staff as well. And then the women's orders, I'm not talking about them as much here, but a lot of the French documents come from the Grey Nuns, come from the Sisters of Saint Joseph of Saint-Hyacinthe, and so on. And so they also had their internal documents in French, and they kept chronicles. And then you'll find that the events are not described in the same way by the nuns and the fathers, the sisters and the fathers. Lots of letters, lots of correspondence, right? They'll request funding, they'll ask for new buildings, they'll ask for students, they'll complain about students being sent to non-Catholics, to the Protestant residential schools. Lots of quarrels, people who don't like each other or do not like the way that things are being run. They'll give updates on how the school is being run, about their needs. They'll share their impressions about what's going on, and they'll give instructions to subordinates, right? So you have requests, but orders as well coming from above. And then here and there, you'll find journals. And a lot of these haven't been even, not only are they not digitized yet, they're often not treated. And then maybe they're just throw that to Veronique to explain later. But we don't even necessarily have access to those yet. They're not necessarily meant to be private because priests and brothers knew that nothing they really did was actually private. But they certainly weren't never meant to be read beyond their own order. What you can expect to find in these documents? Well, there's rarely solid information in there about the children. They're not going to say one of our priests did this horrible thing today, right? So you have to read between the lines. It's a lot of clues that you're going to find, lots of hints. You'll be able to cross-reference with other documents. And so this is not, it's important to not see the archival documents as validating the stories of former students and survivors. The idea is to start with the knowledge of former students, of survivors, and then add to that with what they couldn't possibly know. Because here we have that middle ground. The TRC had the policy, all the government, well, many of the government documents, and they had some of the testimony of former students. But students, as children, didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, and the government didn't know how the policies were applied. So this is what we're starting to find out now, because these documents were kept from the TRC, and many documents are still kept from researchers as well. So this is something to add, right, to give more detail to the stories that can already be found within communities. You'll have all kinds of mentions, who's coming, who's going, when are children going to doctors, when illnesses run through a school, epidemics, right? You see it, and then those are often really tough to read because you hear about different children getting really sick and dying. And then you also see them being a lot sadder about the fact that their colleagues are ill or have died than they are sad about the children dying. So lots of bureaucratic information, how the school functioned, and how they dealt with specific problems. So this is where you'll read about the children running away, for instance. There's a few things here that I want to share in terms of principles dealing with translations. I have two ethical concerns. One is the exploitation of the money. So we know this very clearly. Anytime the government has money for indigenous peoples and communities, there's always settlers and colonizers ready to jump in, sweep in, and take that money. Some lawyers overcharged during the TRC. There's court cases around this. Some companies abused the trust of First Nations communities and just bought the ground penetrating radar without knowing how to use it. There's a lot of re-traumatization that happened during independent assessment as well, because that was serving the government's desire and the church's desire to not be sued, rather than actually serve the needs of former students. So obviously, I'm concerned about the fact that translators might come in and say, this is expensive work, give me a bunch of money. Communities will say, okay, we don't really know anybody, so that's fine. And then the work may or may not be good, may or may not be priced fairly, right? Because there's no regulations about translation. Anyone can say that they're a translator. And often people think they can translate because they speak two languages. And that's not usually the case. So a few things for you to know. This is recorded, so you can go back to the recording to find this, or of course you can take a screenshot if you want. But usually a price for a translation is between 15 and 19 cents per word. It'll probably go up to 25, 26, even 30 cents when you have handwritten documents, because those are so tough to read, it takes so much longer, right? So there's for more formal or technical translations, is going to be more expensive as well. So it's really important here to know that it's easy for me, for instance, or Veronique, to understand the older French that's in these documents because our respective grandparents spoke this French, and so we heard it. But most French speakers in Canada now don't understand a lot of the French that's in there. They understand the general idea around it, and there's good resources past that. But the central part, the most important things that you're after, that's going to be easy enough to understand in these documents. The rest, people will know that's not clear, and they'll have to ask or find the right tools to look at it. A few principles that we need to look at around translation about the data belonging to you. So you need to have a good confidentiality agreement. and a good data management agreement so that it's clear what the translators will do with the files, how they'll share them with you or not. You need to keep track of the documents on your end, keep your own copies after the fact as well. The translators need to step away from the client service kind of approach and develop a collaboration with the nation they're working with. And then there's a need for discussion here, right? And talking with them. And they're often not used to that. It's not part of their training. Even decolonization within translation studies doesn't actually involve creating relationships with the people that they work with, right? So those are things that are important to know. It's not necessarily going to be easy for them, but it's something to keep in mind as well, because you'll get better results if you actually share what's important to you and what you want from them specifically. So it's important to have these relationships. You can ask things from translators as well. They can flag certain topics, right? These are things that you might want to see. And they also need a certain amount of training. You can give them access to some of the already existing training that's out there. I'm going over this really quickly because it's not the main idea here, but just some things for you to keep in mind if you're working with translators. What does this look like? If you haven't already seen them, I've just got a few pictures here. This is all publicly available documents. Anybody can go and find them, and so that's why I use them here. You don't have to do with any one school. Oh, I forgot that here. So you've got, letters, cover pages. That's pretty easy to read if it's typed. You can spend some time with it. You'll often have some archival indications up on the top. And sometimes you'll have handwritten additions as well, right? Depending on whether the author or researchers down the line have, from their own communities and orders, have made some changes. You can have some schedules, you can have some notes, right? You see this on the right here. This is not even a document for anyone. That's a speech that somebody was going to give. So we have notes from the speech. Type reports, this can be really tedious and really long, and the quality can be, not really great to read. You've got letters that are almost impossible to decipher, like this one here. So it can really change quite a bit from one document to the next. So please feel free to email me. You've got my office number as well here if you want to reach out in that way. You can also add your questions in the Q&A here, and we'll get to them after my colleagues speak. I'm very grateful to have a chance to speak with you today. Very happy to get your questions as well. And if we have time afterwards, I can say a few words about the project we have to build capacity within Indigenous communities and build a center around training. But I'll just leave that hanging for now because that's like beyond the scope of what we're actually talking about today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jerome. That was a lot of information. I've been taking notes, honestly, because this is really helpful. Really, I think you've really shed some clear light on, the basics of what's all included when we're talking about these records in particular. So I look forward to discussion. But next, first, before we get to discussion, I'm going to next turn it off to Veronique Mireault.
Thank you. I'm gonna try to share my PowerPoint here. And how's that look? That's good. Okay. Okay. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, for depending where you are tuning from. My name is Veronique Mireault. For those in Neyawak country, Veronique Nitsigason, Otkanagassastege, Otsunia, no, Dojage Otsunia, Otkanagassastege, Niwigan Megwets, Monia Isque Onia, Kitchik Iskiwana Mikamikuk, Nita Toscan. So my name is Veronique Mireault. I already said that. I'm a white settler originally from Montreal, but I live in Regina since 2010 here in Treaty 4. I'm currently a master's student under Dr. Melancon and James Datchuk. My research focus on the history of medical colonialism in the Keppel Valley, and I'm looking specifically at the hospital that was running out of the Keppel Industrial School from 84 to 36. I have also a background in Korean language literacy. I'm still learning. I will be for a long time, but I really enjoy the language. And I have a background also in Indigenous studies. So I've been collaborating. I've joined the team with Jerome in 2022. And since we have been collaborating with several different teams for different nations in their effort to identify unmarked grave and find missing loved ones. I also have been working as a researcher and translator with an Indigenous-owned company based in Payapot, doing the same type of work. And now, more recently, I started as the community engagement coordinator for this new documentation center we are working on at University of Regina. Also, thank you, Elder Larry. I think you stepped out for a minute for your prayer and your good words. And so, with my work, I'm often on the ground with team. I will go on field trip and adventure with different team, either in archive, sometimes museum and historical center. So today I will talk about some of the challenge we have noticed over time and some tips and tricks to overcome them. Which start with the catalog, so the very beginning of the research. And obviously this will differ from an archival repository to another. So one main challenge is sometimes the catalog will be in French. Not the bigger repository like LAC or the Saint Boniface Historical Society. Those often have them translated in both language, but some smaller centers, sometimes the catalog may be in French. So this is where sometimes it can be helpful to have someone like me who's bilingual who know what we're looking for, to sit down with the team and start that research from the very beginning. The catalogs also will have different level of details. Some are very helpful. Each item will be described, but sometimes it's going to be very vague. So we need to be a little bit more wide in our research and either have a good conversation with the archivist if someone is available readily, or to take a chance and see when we arrive on site. Some of the repository where we go, smaller institutions, sometimes the archivist or the volunteer won't know even some of the items that they have if they don't have the human resource that are bilingual. Sometimes they're gonna have things in boxes or in the back that they're not entirely sure, either because they're not treated yet. They didn't have time to get to it. So for example, a couple of months ago, I was in a parish. There was a nicely written oblate journal in the display. So I asked, oh, whose journal is that? And the volunteer did not know who it was or what it contained. So now we are working at establishing that relationship. So we can access the document, help them to know what's in there. So that's help them when they have visitors, and also give access to the community we're working with to what it's contained. Some of the important documents that we are looking for, they're not always treated. This is a reality nationwide. Archivists are very, very busy. The archives are often understaffed for the amount of work they have to do. So there is lots of documents that are not treated yet. But in some case, like for example, coming back to the St. Boniface Historical Society, we have those relationships that allow us to access some of the documents that are not entirely treated, but for the work we do, they will give us access. For example, one fund that is very central for our research is at least for the school that were run by the Oblates in this area of the territory, the Fond des Châtelets. It's not, most of it is not cataloged yet, but we know it's there. So having a conversation with the archivist, we can arrange to go consult the document. Some documents that are also very important, they may not be with the main Oblates fund, where is often our first stop to look at document. There are also what we call personal fund. So the individual fund of a priest, a brother, or it could be a nun in some case, but here, the Oblate at the St. Boniface Historical Society, they are starting to go through those individual funds. So those are the personal item, the personal documents that the priest has collected throughout his career. So you're gonna find some personal project. Some will have some interest in anthropology and linguistic and history. So you may find some historical note, some research, some personal journal. Sometimes you're gonna find some documents that are associated with the residential school. I saw some instances where they kept those documents and they bring them with them, even if it was not in the region you would typically think you would find those documents. When they move to a different region, sometimes they bring documents from their previous workplace. So you're gonna find stuff like pictures as well. So those are very, very helpful. And they are currently being treated. So that's a good resource to keep your eyes open for. One big challenge too is that those who keep those records can be very creative with the spelling of the names, the terminology they use. So there's some things that we can keep in mind, like learning the different words, the different names that are used over time for a place, for example, because many of those missions, well, they had an indigenous local language name, but they were named by the French, by the English, and that name changed over time. So that's a good thing to know those different terms to widen your research. Unfortunately, there's situation to the priest, mostly in terms of proper name. They will be creative with the spelling. So they're gonna write names phonetically. They're gonna sometimes francisize a name. They're gonna or the other way around. Sometimes it's gonna be used the English way, depending on which area they are. So in those instances, and you can see some example on the slide, I recommend people to to keep track as they come across the document, to take note of those different spelling, because they are likely to be used by the same person in the document. So that can be useful in your search term. Mostly if you're looking at correspondence database, for example, in Canadiana, or at newspapers, those spelling might pop different document depending how they were cataloged. If you're lucky and the name is just francisized or anglicized, you can have a guess what they have been turned into, but sometimes the priest will give a full European name to the children. So that's a challenge too, also, when you try to keep track of someone. So Jerome already covered that part, but something to keep in mind in the type of documents we look for are codexes, chronicle, daily journal, historical note, correspondence, parochial records. Again, it can be much wider than that, but those are usually the first one you keep in mind when you start your research, and then you look what else there is. So sometimes a team will ask me or some of my colleagues to go with them on site. So if you have a resource in your area who speak French, whenever you're a team member, this is how it can be helpful to organize your research day on site. So if it's just me or you have only one person speaking French, one of the first thing we do when we arrive on site, I look at the box we have accessible, I open them, I look what it contains to prioritize, and then I can assign documents and consult with my colleagues to see what are we scanning first. If there's more of us, then we can divide the work and start going to the document and going a little bit more in detail in the document itself. For example, a couple of years ago, Jerome and I were able to go with a team together. So we just split into one, pull the folder, look quickly what's in there, and we were able to pull individual document to pass to our colleague to scan. But if there's just very little time, lots of document, only one French speaker, then you need to go a little bit wider and scan a little bit more, and then do the work of going to those documents a little bit more in detail after the fact. If you don't have someone, a French speaker available, and you work mainly with French document, depending on the amount of document you have to go through that day, if it's possible, it's always preferable just to scan if you can, scan everything, and again, then we can have that person to come to go through those documents after and see what's more important on the research at the moment, but it's not always realistic to do. So in that case, one tool that the Historical Society came with is a list of terms that you can go through, that you can keep in mind when you scan the document to know that this document might be important for you, and those will be on the next slide. And also, some team may feel comfortable to use AI tools just to do a quick translation of the document to have an idea what it contains. There are still pros and cons with that, so this is will be part of my colleague Anne-Marie presentation after. But that's also what some teams can keep in mind that exist out there. In our case, I will offer sometimes, I will always offer remote support if it's possible. So if I know that a team is out there, you know, they can text me, call me, send me a screenshot, you know, to just a little bit of guidance remotely. But you know, I would always suggest, when in doubt, scan, and then after that we can see how we can review those documents after the fact, because those trips are expensive, right? So we want to maximize the amount of of important documents we bring back, but we need to be realistic as of what is possible to do while on site. So those are some of the keywords that were suggested by St. Boniface, that if you want to screen the document quickly, if you notice those words, those might be important. Obviously, that's depend on what you're looking for your research. Those ones are more related to children, disease, passing, escapees, that type of things. But that list is bonified. We try to bonify that list over time, and it's going to depend on what you're looking for. And it's limited also, because yeah, on the type document, a one-page type document, it's easier to screen quickly as a 6-page handwritten, badly handwritten document. So those resources are limited, but that's there for you to use if it can be helpful in any way. One other things that is very, very important, and that we are not always thinking about doing, is keeping track of your work. Mostly if those documents are in a language that most of the team does not master. Here with the team I work with, normally we do that work with the team. So you know, it's easy to know what they are, what they contain grossly. But if, for example, you rely on AI tool and you have just a general idea what they are in there, but you're waiting to talk to that French resource, but you still want to keep organized, it's important to try to keep track of what you have as much as possible and take note. So this is the templates of what we're using here to keep kind of an inventory of what we have, but organize as much as possible. And there's also a place where you can put notes. For example, if you know this is a letter regarding a car sales, well, you can put a note so later on you're not looking at that letter if it's not translated yet, asking like, what is it? So and I try to also, like you will notice in the bottom, the English documents are separate from the French, because we also keeping track of what is translated yet, if it's going to be translated, or if it's just going to be summarized, because in some case some of the nations that work with us want to know exactly what's in every document, but not all documents are important to be translated. So documents that are pertaining to children, to anything that's regard the epidemic, or anything that could have affected the children or the community, we will translate in full. But if it's just, again, like a car sales or talking about the harvest, we can just do 2 lines to say this document contained this. It was written on that date. So they know what they have on hand. If it's useful in the future, good. If it's not, at least they know. So that's all there is for me. I hope it was not too confused. I know I tend to speak fast. But here are my contact. I would be happy if we can be of any help. You can always reach out to Jerome or I, and we'd be happy to see how we can be helpful in your research. So Thank you, everyone. Kinanas Komite Nawaw. And I believe I will pass the screen to my colleague here, Anne-Marie.
Thank you very much, Veronique. That was super helpful. Again, more great information. I've already started a list of my own questions for you all. So next, we're going to go to Anne-Marie Wheeler, who has a PowerPoint as well, and we might run into some tech trouble, and if so, then Anne-Marie may just turn off her camera. So meanwhile, go right ahead.
Thank you. So my presentation will be elaborating on something I started or presented over Zoom in Calgary at the end of March of this year. So I'm presenting notes on the use of digital translation tools to translate oblate documents from French into English. And then because I assume most people who will be using these tools don't speak French, there'll be kind of a quick little French lesson worked in there. Basically, the long and short of it is that there are some errors that we can fix that digital translation tools make, and then some that will be trickier and you would probably need a human to fix. Slide 2, please. So about me, I'm a settler born in Toronto. My name is a good clue as to my cultural and linguistic background. Anne-Marie from my mother's French-speaking side, and Wheeler from my dad's English-speaking side. I grew up speaking both languages and remember actually thinking that all men spoke English and all women spoke French, but that everyone understood each other. I didn't realize it, but I was constantly translating. We moved around a lot. Growing up, I lived in Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, and I spent a lot of time in British Columbia. This knowledge I've always had of language being gendered and bound to culture became the focus of my subsequent research into feminist translation theory and in my literary translation practice. Since 2007, I have taught translation and French at the University of Saskatchewan here in Saskatoon. And like Veronique, I was also invited to collaborate on this project in 2022. My two main contributions have been to train students to translate archival documents from Indian residential schools. So I've taught a course on this, co-taught with Jerome and Winona Wheeler and Sheldon Krasowski, a course on how to translate these documents, so providing context, as well as how to correctly or usefully use digital translation tools. And then my second contribution to this project has been to try and create a specified, private, confidential digital translation tool that we could then share with communities. So I now live in and am joining you from Saskatoon, which is on Treaty 6 territory. So Jerome has outlined new ways for communities to work with a human translator. And so in this presentation, I will focus on what happens when you put these documents through a digital translation tool. There are two main problems. The first is around confidentiality, and the second is that these tools do make significant errors. So, next slide, please. So around confidentiality, this could well be a deal breaker for these documents. I won't spend too much time on this except to briefly explain how online translation tools work. So I've listed the big ones, the most popular ones up there: DeepL, Bing, Reverso, Google, Gemini, ChatGPT, and that should read Perplexity AI with a P. So what these do is that they basically source the entire internet for the most likely translation of a word. This is limited because obviously the internet was created long after these documents were, so the most likely translation is going to be more modern French, not likely related to Catholicism. There are a lot of those types of issues, so the most likely translation is going to be not historically accurate. So that's sort of a problem. But then returning to the issue of confidentiality, once you put anything into any one of these websites, it's no longer yours. It is on the internet. It is out there. It is no longer private. So that's really tricky when you're using this tool in the first place to see if a document is sensitive and important. So you have no way to know how sensitive or important it is until you've shared it with the entire internet. So maybe this is where you do find a human translator, as Jerome suggested, and someone who agrees to your terms regarding disclosure. However, there are distinct advantages to online translation tools. There's a mountain of documents to get through, and digital translation is fast. It's almost instantaneous. It is cheap if it's not free. And then the most importantly, possibly the most important argument for digital translation tools came to me from survivors whom I've met just in working on this over the past 3 years. 3 different people have said to me in so many words, "You're going to know what's in those documents before I do." So digital translation tools do have the potential to allow for First Nations community members to be the first to know what's in these documents. So people are going to use digital translation tools, and I guess I'm just going to suggest how. So for the last almost 3 years, I've been using publicly available documents from Indian residential schools to see how these translations come out. Basically test driving these online tools that are out there. And because I only have 20 minutes to tell you about 3 years worth of looking at these tools, I too long didn't read. DeepL appears to be the best one. Oh, I guess we can go to slide 3. Sorry. 3 is good. So as Jerome has pointed out, the vast majority of these documents were written by priests for other priests and government officials. So as he stated again, they're unlikely to contain details about the abuses they themselves committed. However, these French documents could, at a minimum, tell us who was where, when. So the question is whether these digital translation tools, whether this information, who was where, when, comes out in these digital translation tools. As Jerome put it, the comings and goings that appear in these official documents. So setting aside anything about complex meanings and often hidden and coded meanings or layered language usage, this presentation will look strictly at where and why digital translation tools can mess up basic who was where when information. So on this slide, just a closer look at some of this handwriting that Jerome had shared, some letters, the type of things we're up against. Many of these documents are handwritten, which means that there's an initial transcription that has to happen before you can even put it into a translation tool. So I've listed here 3 different transcription websites. Transcribus, I've put it first because it seems to be does the best job. But it's still really, to be honest, is not great. The human eye is still better at deciphering handwriting. So as an English speaker, looking at this letter, let's say you're English speaker, you're very gifted at deciphering handwriting, cursive, and you carefully type the letter out word by word. So you can see the 1st of June, 1930, is that 1 or is it 37? And then it's addressed to Monsignor, and now we read that word. Is that a D-U-F-A-R-T? Is that a D-U-P-R-O-F? Is that a, you find yourself looking at it upside down and sideways to try and figure it out. So it could be Monseigneur du Prof, Monseigneur du Prat, Monseigneur du Frof, Monseigneur du Fra. And now a French speaker, a human being French speaker, can tell you right away that it's probably du Prof or du Prat, as those are actually French names, whereas, the other ones aren't. And then you need an extra additional layer of research. And if you were to do that, you would find out that it's likely Bishop Reginald Duprat, who was a church administrator and then bishop in Prince Albert in 1937 until his death in 1954, which then makes you realize that, okay, so that's probably a 7 in that 1931. So all this is to say, before we've even started translating anything, we're still using, your translators will be using their French to even sort out names, dates, which should be straightforward information. Next slide, please. So even when documents are typed, and this is a letter dated March 17th, 1934, digital translation tools will trip up on language errors and typos, and these documents are full of them. So this first sentence here that I've put, j'espère que le père Anguin qui en est chargé verra à cela. So if you were just typing this out as an English speaker, you would think that this was Father Anginki. But actually there should be a space between those two words. It's Father Anguin who is in charge. So right there, you could be creating a name, you know, if you were to put this in a digital translation tool, you're creating a name that doesn't exist. So digital translation tools will take information like this and then try to make sense of the rest of the sentence. And then often what happens is it gets completely off track. And it's like a bad game of telephone, if you've ever played that, where you whisper something into someone's ear and then it comes out differently and then it comes out differently. So all of these layers, if you didn't have the French background or a translator working with you, would be sort of additional steps where really significant errors could happen in terms of who did what. So as part of this specialized DeepL translation tool that we're developing, there will be a glossary of names to reduce these types of errors. So you would see that Angang was someone, Angenki is not. It gives you more of a clue. This is the type of thing that we can do in creating a digital translation, a specialized digital translation tool. Next slide, please. But there's another order of business that no specialized tool will be able to help us with French. And these are the things that are baked right into the French language. And here's an example of one that relates to who did something. So the subject pronoun on is an excellent example of something that would be obvious to a French-speaking human being reader, but digital translation tools continue to mistranslate, often to disastrous effect. So on is a first person plural like we, but whereas nous is the standard register of translation, we, or on for we, so you would say nous instead of we. On kind of splits. It's either super friendly, like lower register, so kind of like a we, we're friends, we're family, or it's a really high impersonal pronoun. So similar to the English, how we'd say one does not, you know, accept bribes. So it's kind of that impersonal one. So on can go either way. Because on is used to mean we, the lower register one, the vast majority of times, digital tools will usually translate it as such. But if we go on to slide number 7. So here's a sentence. De votre côté, ne refusez aucun enfant que l'on voudra vous donner, which should translate as, for your part, do not refuse any child that we want to give you, or it can go either way. Any child that we want to give you versus, for your part, do not refuse any child that may be offered to you. So that's how that split works in action. It can either be we, or it can be kind of this impersonal. So if you look at what the digital translation tools did with this, for your part, don't refuse any children that someone wants to give you. Google translated that as, for your part, do not refuse any child that anyone wants to give you. Reverso said, on your side, do not refuse any child that they will want to give you. So you can really see here how easily an online translation tool could attribute an action to the wrong person or organization entirely. Slide 8, please. So I'm moving on to issues that have arisen with that relate to where a person may be. So similar to deciphering handwriting, there's an initial translation between different measurement languages. So from miles to kilometers, for instance. And then a lot of these documents also contain agricultural units of measurement, quarter section, that type of thing. Elsewhere, Jerome, among others, has tracked how place names have changed over time. And then meanwhile, when place names are also common nouns, as they often are here in Saskatchewan, online translation tools have a hard time recognizing them as names. So an online translation tool can recognize a name often and then leave it as a name so they won't attempt to translate it. But for instance, with Lac des Oignons, it was translated by Bing as Lake of Onions, by Google as Lake Onions, by ChatGPT. ChatGPT left it as Lac des Oignons. So an English reader, there's possible confusion that could come up for an English reader. Only Reverso got it right and called it Onion Lake. So again, this type of error can be remedied in the personalized translation tool we're developing with the addition of people's names. We are doing an additional glossary of place names. However, similar to the previous example where there are problems we can fix and then others that are baked right into French, for which a human translator is required, is the issue of the translation of prepositions. So they will remain a challenge. Prepositions are those words that put things into relation to each other, such as in, over, under, with, for, etc. So they stand as a remarkable testament to how different languages describe spatial relations differently. And this can have serious implications for documents in which readers are needing to know who was where, when. So consider the following phrase. Pendant l'absence du père Brachet dans l'émission de Swan Lake, Shoal River et Birch River du 11 au 28 janvier. So various translation tools rendered this as Father Brachet's absence from Swan Lake. So Bing and Reverso. Father Brachet's absence in Swan Lake, which is ambiguous in English. And then it just kind of leaves the reader, the English reader, unsure as to where the priest was during those dates. Is he in Swan Lake? Is he absent from Swan Lake? ChatGPT came up with Father Brachet's absence on missions to Swan Lake. So that is the most correct. But best again here for a human translator to reword this entire thing for clarity, which would be, while Father Brachet was away visiting the missions at Swan Lake, Shoal River, and Birch River from January 28th or 11th to 28th. Another issue that he raised, this leads us to issues that arise from when certain things happen. So the next slide, please. A lot of these documents are in the historical present, and that's where everything is in the present tense. And you kind of have to figure out, this happens in both in French and in English, whether something already happened, is happening, or will happen. So if you look at this sentence, and this is from the Camperville Codex Historicus from 1928, it says, Le 31 janvier, notre engagé nous revient pour recommencer à travailler tranquillement. Sa blessure n'est pas complètement guérie. So I've highlighted, those are both present tense verbs. And the translation would be, January 31st, our envoy returns to slowly get back to work. His wound is not yet completely healed. So there is ambiguity. You can see how it kind of leaves you wondering, without the date of this particular entry, it leaves you wondering, is he back yet? Like, so is the envoy back and he's gotten back to work despite his wound? Or is January 31st coming up and he's going to wait until his wound is healed before starting to work on January 31st? So this comes up a lot in translation where we have to figure out the chronology of things. And it can be complicated when everything is in the present tense. Another particularity of the French language, and this brings us to my last slide, is the ease with which any French verb can be used in the conditional sense or the subjunctive tenses. But in English, they're awkward in the conditional, and as for the subjunctive, all but defunct. So this is important because both these verb tenses create space for actions that have not yet happened, but may in the case of the conditional, or would, could, should happen in the case of the subjunctive. So English forces this entire area of uncertainty into actions that have, will, or will be happening. So here in this, I've just got an excerpt of a letter here. This is dated August 30th, 1921. And I've highlighted, just to show you how much the conditional is used in French, I've highlighted 8 verbs in which the conditional is used. And then there's a subjunctive in there as well, one of them. And then I'll just give you an example in English to show you how what happens with these. So the long and short of this is basically a document about, potential land ownership and what would happen if maybe we sold the land or what we could do. Anyway, so it should read, or the department could remain owners of the house. And if later the school were to disappear, it could sell it either to us or whoever might like to buy it. So that's how it should translate, but reverse translated all of those coulds into the department would remain the owner of the house. And if later the school would disappear, he would sell it either to us or someone who would buy it. So you can see how in the English, it becomes much more definitive so the online translation, certain actions become much more definitive in their English translations than they ever were in the French documents. So in conclusion, I've sought in this presentation to give you concrete examples of why you can't rely entirely on digital translation tools, even for what should be basic information, who was where, when. And again, this completely omits any sort of language subtleties, coded language, and things that we have seen in this document that a human translator would be really helpful for. And then again, there's the issue of things on the internet being available now publicly. So my suggestion would be, we're developing this DeepL Pro tool. So DeepL is the best digital translator that I've been able to find for these documents. We can buy, and we have purchased, Jerome and his research team for the center have purchased a private DeepL Pro. So we pay for it and it's password protected, and the documents that we put into it do not end up on the internet at large. And we're also putting glossaries of terms. So again, place names, people names. So the who and the where should be much more obvious. Or less likely to get it completely incorrect anyway. And my suggestion would be for communities to see if they can get access to this DeepL Pro, use it to find out which documents are of particular interest to them. And then once you've identified which documents you would like to have someone take a more careful look at, to work with a trained human translator to make sure that we're getting the context correct and getting the information correct. That's all. Thank you for your time. I'm so grateful that the internet held out for me.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. That was, again, just yet more enlightening information. As someone who learned French as an adult and then spent 5 years teaching adult Francophones how to speak English in Quebec City, I recognize so many of these translation difficulties from a deeply personal experience. So now, as as we spotlight, yes, there we go, all of our panelists, it's now time to go to questions. So again, I'll just direct everyone's attention to the Q&A box where we already have one question. I will just say that you should have the option to put in a question or comment anonymously if you like. If you have put your name, I will share your first name at least, just for accessibility so that we can all see or know what's been asked. So our first question has come. This is a nice, easy one for you panelists. The first question is, will the PowerPoints be shared? So Jerome, I know you've already said yes. Anne-Marie, Veronique, you're down? Okay, so that is a yes, Lucinda. What else has twigged questions for people's curiosity? I know that was a lot of information. It can be a lot to take in and process into immediate questions. But while folk are pondering, actually, you already answered, Anne-Marie, one of my first questions, which was literally, are there resources out there for transcribing bad handwriting besides asking someone who can read it better than you? So thanks, that's immensely helpful. I plan on using these myself. Because I know accessing English language documents, even as a native speaker, there we go. I'm stuck in franglais in my mind now. That can be very hard. We don't tend to write in cursive ourselves anymore, so that's marvelous. And thanks for sharing those limitations too, and those excellent examples of how badly AI can get it wrong. I know that adding context often helps, but it's still not always going to come out the right way.
I was going to say that
yeah.
actually one issue in translating or in training translators to work on these documents and going through the documents has actually been that young translators, and this is many of the students coming into universities right now, have never learned how to write cursive anymore.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even taught in schools anymore. I have apparently that's what I hear. I have nieces who are in school. Okay.
The French school still teaches cursive.
Interesting. I often found in teaching English to adult francophones, it took a bit of a review of French language grammar, which hadn't, been covered for a long time, to say, so this is how it actually works in French. Now let's talk about how it works in English. We have a question that's come in from Kathleen. She has said, hello, everyone. Jerome, I had contacted you in the past about a glossary of terms that could be shared with communities. Has this been done, or is this the same glossary that you were using for the translator? Could they be shared outside of use in the DeepL?
Hi, Kathleen, thanks for this. I do remember that exchange. Yes, we're still working on those. We're getting closer to having something that can be shared. We're trying it out and just making sure that we're not missing too much. And because these keep changing, we want to make sure that we have a solid resource before we actually do share it. In the meantime, if you have translators working with you, I'm happy to meet with you and them and share what we have right now with you, just while explaining how it works, right? And then just on a more like direct manner, but that's not shared like officially at this point. But yeah, I can share it personally with people and then explain how we use it. And just while we're talking about this too, we have the chat going on as well, but Trina has suggested that we can elaborate on our project. So Sandra, let me know when that's a good time for us to do that.
Oh, sure. Kathleen has said thank you very much. So far, there are no other questions just yet. So if you'd like to elaborate on your projects now, go for it.
Okay, well, basically what we find is that there's a need for research teams to learn a lot about many parts of the research, right? So most members of research teams have translatable knowledge and skills already that they can bring into this work. But there's still a lot to learn when it comes to every single step of the way. And no one at this point, or ever really, should have to pay for this. And so we're looking at starting a center of sorts. We've been talking with former students who are also knowledge keepers for a few months, and got a grant just to make the creation possible, and talking with people. So we've talked with some research teams already, and we've talked with archivists to get a sense of what the needs are. Since we do a lot of the work as well, right? We're involved in every aspect around the archives and some of the oral interviews as well. We had a good sense of what was needed, but we're getting even more through this. And so the idea is to really build capacity in Indigenous communities and make all different kinds of resources and training available. So we're talking about the DeepL Pro that we're working on, that Amanda was just talking about. What the hope is that that can be a resource that can be put out there. The glossaries can be sort of officially available in the same way. There can be short courses. They can be everything from podcasts to reports to one pagers on the different aspects of this research, for researchers to, or really anybody doing research that's similar to this, because for them to access freely, right? So then when it comes to spending time together and training a group, that's a bit different because of the time that's involved with that. So the center is, underway. We're trying to get that set up and to get it set up in a good way. So we're trying to take our time, make sure we learn from all of our mistakes and learn from all the experience that's already out there. There's a lot of teams that have been working on this for many years now. So we don't want to just barge in and invent something that ends up already have been figured out many times. But the medium term hope is to have the capacity to train people for the basic aspects of the research, and then to put people in contact with each other who are doing this research so that they can learn from each other as well. And then past that, develop more resources,
Yes.
more capacities for people too. So that's where training researchers, training archivists, as well as training the research teams. So and it's really a matter of supporting people as opposed to following our own agenda. And so there's a need for really good accountabilities to be built. So that's why we're taking our time putting things together well. But we want everything that we're finding out now, this research we're doing on methods and methodologies, to be accessible to everybody doing this work. And yes, there's the residential schools, but there's also the 60 scoop and the millennial scoop and the scoop that's still going on now. We have these distinctions, but it's been ongoing and it hasn't stopped, right? There's the work with the day schools. So there's so much there's going to be the hospitals. There's going to be so many other institutions, right? So we're starting with the IRS system right now, but this kind of training is going to be really helpful for many people over time. And so we're very happy to hear from anyone who would like to contribute or would like to know more as we're building this together. So what we're giving you here is a third look, I guess, where we keep adding to what we're doing with what we're learning, but so have a third look overall at what we've learned so far, specifically for working with French documents.
Veronique and Marie, would either of you like to add to what Jerome has said?
I think he said it.
Hey, fair enough. So far, there's still no further questions from the chat. I'm curious to know, just for my own part, maybe, who we have here. If you want to put into the Q&A, if you're a community researcher or someone who supports research, and independent, just a curious member of community, Okay, there is a question as well, but please do share that if you would like to. Kathleen has another question. She has asked, how can we follow along the development of this resource center?
Talk to me. I'd be happy to meet with you, right? And see where we're at. And we're actually at a point where we want to meet with more people, make more connections. This has to be a partnership. This has to be decentralized. This has to serve what's going on, right? And so, if you're interested in knowing what we're up to, the best way is to show up in my inbox and then set up a meeting. I'd be very, very happy to speak with you about it. I'm saying
Sounds
me,
good.
I can do these kind of things because I'm sort of letting my colleagues do their work, do like the really important stuff each on their own. I've got some of mine stuff as well, but I'm trying to make sure that at the Monial here, I'm the white guy who's not telling my colleagues what to do, but trying to make sure that they have everything they need to do their own work that they can direct themselves. And same goes for other communities. We're not here to tell you what to do or how to do it, just to share with you what people have already found is useful, and then let you pick what's going to be helpful for you.
And I think it is really fantastic to have people who really know how to interact with archives and primary source data like this, do that initial sorting. I know my role with the NCTR is to give public educational presentations on the history and ongoing fallout of the residential school system. So I do use the resource or the archives myself in my own research, and sometimes that sifting process it's a lot just to figure out, what am I looking at? What is this? How do I contextualize these documents? One person has answered my question of who you are in our audience today. Ling Jin, I hope I've said your name well. You've identified as a Sioux Valley Dakota Nation researcher, which is very neat. Kathleen has also said, I'm a researcher working for, oh man, West Coast names always get me, Stolo, that's my best guess, communities in BC. What would you say? Okay, Ling Jin, you've said the Brandon Residential School Project, which was run by the United Church, so mainly English records, but I would like to learn here today. Wonderful.
And just to add to what we're doing with around the training for archives is beyond the French, right? Like this is for beyond the French language, just for everyone doing this kind of work. And there's going to be, other needs to understand what's going on in these documents too. So hopefully this is helpful to you as well. What we've covered around working with archives.
I found it so interesting. I think, Veronique, it was you who shared that many of these archives, are essentially run by volunteers. I've done a little bit of work with Dalnavert House here in Winnipeg, which is just a museum. But yeah, it's primarily staffed by volunteers who don't necessarily understand all the nuances of sharing, the life story of Hugh John MacDonald and his family. So yeah, volunteers are fantastic, but volunteers and professional archivists are not the same thing.
But one thing that I should have mentioned in my presentation is most center, archive, museum I've talked to have been so helpful, and I would warmly recommend for teams as early as possible in their project, reach out to the archivist, talk about your project, create that relationship. Like most of them are so helpful, and even if it's take time and there's some more documents that pop up 2 years because they come across something, if they know ahead of time what you're looking for, then they can take the time to think about it, what they have, or at least point you in the right direction. But a big part of that work is really to build that relationship with the different places, and there's lots of great people everywhere. Thankfully, we need we need that with that type of work. But in the majority of case, we've had a great relationship and partnership. Again, like mentioning that little parish, the volunteer there, lovely lady who's very passionate about what she was doing. She was ecstatic about knowing that, well, we'll be able to give her some sense of what's in there. So it's helpful for them and it's helpful for us. And then that relationship is there if, you know, something else pop up in that parish who, you know, was involved in many different First Nation in that area. So yes, those relationships are so important.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question. I'm just going to share first that Lucinda Paul, you've shared lots of hard for my mouth West Coast names again, but you're working with Kamloops basically in collecting oral tellings in relation to your sacred sites, and you've done training and research and archives as well. Very cool. Ling has asked the question, how do you find the untreated records and get access to them?
Veronique
Again,
can
that's
answer
gonna.
that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Again,
Veronique
that's
can answer
gonna be.
that.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, it's gonna be through the relationship with the archivist again. You know, some of them, like in most case, for example, at Saint Boniface, they have a good idea of what you're looking for because they've been working for many years with lots of different teams. But in some case, you might need to know what you're looking for and then talk to your local archive and see if they might have what you're looking for. And for that, what I would suggest, it's a good thing to keep track of who was working in the school, the mission, the agency, the Department of Indian Affairs Agency at that time. So then you can keep track of those people and where those archives are. Because people move, right? And sometimes they bring documents with them. So if you know, for example, if you look, the most simple example would be a priest. Priest work in that school, but then he was transferred in another school in a different province, Ablet province. Then it would be, you know, that the document for that specific province are held in Alberta, for example. Well, then you can look for document pertaining to that priest in that repository. So to know where the priest come from, in which different places he might have work after a stay at a specific school, can be helpful to track where document might be. And sometimes it's going to be a local historical society. For example, I found because so many a member of the French community were involved in the residential school at different level and different positions, sometimes teaching. Like I did find some residential school documents in very small French local historical society that don't even have a catalog, but talking to the volunteers running the archive there. Oh yeah, like I have that. So it's really to run a detective work and then open that communication with who is working there. And sometimes you're gonna across the line find out more information and go back to where you were before. And it's an ongoing process, but the only thing that you can do to know what might be there is really to talk to the people who are there.
So the the moral of the story is always befriend the elderly volunteers. Yeah, no, but it does come down to relationship, right? And that's the piece that was missing all along in this whole system. So, all right, Lynn has a follow-up question. Sorry, Ling, you've asked, that's my next question. What does the timeline look like? Any suggested ideas?
Sorry, the timeline for what?
Ling, would you like to clarify? Oh, accessing untreated records. Thank you.
I mean, that's tough, right? They're doing you a favor if they're letting you do it. Technically speaking, as archivists, it's not that they're not supposed to, but that's not how things work. And because your work right now is highly sensitive, very important, it's a priority, and because I think most archivists will understand that former students need these answers while they're still with us, um, they'll be more willing to share some of these documents with you. But please don't expect that they will, because they may have policies that prevent them entirely from doing it. They might let somebody they like or trust more for reasons that have nothing to do with you look at them and not others, right? So this is really just a matter of if you know where the documents are, and you can ask if there's more, if there's any that have not been treated, any other documents by priests, by other members of the clergy, by the sisters who worked there, if there were, um, um, and see what they tell you, and then past that, the timeline could be anytime from "oh, you're here now, let me show you," to "I have to ask 75 people, including the church in question. They may or may not ever get back to me, so I can't possibly tell you." Some people it's right away. Some people it's been years that it took to actually have access to anyone. Or people that I know have come really close to getting access to the documents, but then there's a shift in who's in charge. They don't want to share them anymore. Or it's no, 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 these don't exist, and suddenly we'll share this because now we changed our policies. So it's please don't have any expectations for this at this point. The church did not give these documents to the TRC, even when the courts forced them to, because then they said they didn't have the capacity, which is not false. They don't have archivists. They could put people on it though, right? So they chose not to put resources on this. That's the Catholic Church. That's different from for other churches, obviously. So even when they're forced by the courts to share these documents, they don't necessarily do it. And the charitable version is to say, like, yes, they did not have the capacity. No one could actually get to the documents and share them in time. There's also less generous or less charitable understandings of why it is that they did not share this and are still not sharing it. Why is it that it's up to you to put all the money into scanning or accessing it, or the NCTR, which only has so much capacity? They're doing really great work, but they can't like just magically scan and everything, and they certainly can't go to the archives to sort them out and treat the documents, right? So there's still the question of who's responsible for sharing all these documents, sort of like who's responsible for the schools themselves, who's responsible for their legacy. All this goes together, right? So anyway, very long-winded question, which is down to blame colonialism, and just tell you like it depends on how lucky you are. That's the timeline I would give you.
And if I can add to what Jerome just shared, again, it's gonna depend on the places. For example, if I look at the Fonds des Châtelets, the Fonds des Châtelets was previously already treated. It's just the fund move. It was donated to. There was an agreement with the Historical Society, so the fund is already organized. It just haven't been treated in the new repository. So in that case, in terms of timeline, I can access a document in the same capacity as other documents. It's just not on the catalog, so I just need to talk to the but in other instances where a good relationship is with the archivist and that they are able to do that, there was instances that we were able to put some item that we were looking for on top of the priority to be treated. So again, that's gonna depend on what it is. You know, if it's 6 meters of document or if it's just like one folder, that's gonna be different. But in some case, we were able to talk to the archivist, let them know what we're looking for, and then they nicely offer to put them on top of the list of those to be treated. But again, that's depends sometimes. If they're lucky, they're gonna have a summer student that can do that. So it depends on many things. But it's always a good thing to talk to the archivist to see what is possible to do. But yeah.
Thanks for that answer. Ling has responded, true, we do need, sorry, I'm sort of transcribing your answer. We do need to manage our expectations. We have made progress, but there are still gaps. That's why I feel anxious and worried about the potential untreated records, but thank you for your answer. So, yeah, and I think managing our expectations and realizing just what the scope of work is here is an important piece of this work, right? Yeah, 6 meters of record. Just when you said that, Veronique, I just thought, oh wow, that would take so much time, especially if they're all handwritten documents like the ones Anne-Marie was sharing. So, okay. Oh, a question just came in. Kathleen has asked one more question. Is there a timeline for the release of the DeepL Pro translator? I'm editing that in because DeepL already exists, right? But the DeepL Pro that's being developed?
Yeah, our account. I really wish I could give you an answer. And Marie, what do you think? Yeah.
So the DeepL Pro has two sort of branches that we're working on right now. The first is all of the list of glossaries that we're trying to get together. So yeah, Catholic terminology, place names. Another glossary we have is just the way people spoke in that time in the 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s. So some kind of expressions. And then there's this other half that relates more to the AI function that we really need to look at much more carefully because, again, we want to make sure that what we have is something that's contained. It's the confidentiality aspect. So, what I was hoping, so I'm not a computer person, I'm a translation person, but what I was envisioning is AI needs if you imagine the internet being like an ocean, in order to translate, your document needs to be put in that ocean for AI to work. So right now, it appears that if we want to keep things confidential, then it's not part of the ocean. So either we have a translation tool that only has our glossaries in it, or we don't have something confidential. And what I was hoping we could build or envisioning was imagine a shark cage. So we could swim and have kind of a barrier between our documents and then while still benefiting from all of the language that's in the ocean. So, yeah, the question is, can we build this? We need to get computer people on board. We need to think this through. So right now, what we can do with our closed DeepL is we have someone who's good with computers working on it. And what she needs is many documents that have been carefully translated from French into English so that she can put them in our closed little house and see how much it informs the AI. And right now, the answer to that is not much, drop in the bucket. So to have a good DeepL Pro, what we would need is lots of properly translated French and English documents. So how long will it take us to get those? And the more we put in, the better it is.
And then the other side of that is when are we able to actually give people access to what we have so far, which isn't It's not much better than the public one, but it is better because it's confidential, right? And so essentially, it's at what point will we have the organizational capacity to like have agreements between the university and research team or First Nation so that we can make this happen because it actually costs a lot of money to run this, and so we can, unfortunately cannot at this point because we don't have the funding for it. We can't give free access to it because then we'd be paying for it, and we don't have the money for that. So it's about like getting that money, getting that set up, and having the organizational capacity. So as soon as the center is created, essentially, then we can move to those kind of things. That timeline is hopefully by the end of this calendar year that we'll have like a center in place that can enter into partnerships and those kind of things. So that would be my very, very optimistic and tentative overall timeline that by the end of the calendar year, we'll have capacity to have other accounts as part of our shark cage or our little like confined space within DeepL. And then we'll at that point when it's ready definitely reach out, and of course if we have an ongoing relationship, then we'll let you know a bit before we actually go broader with this.
Yeah, like to give an idea, DeepL, just regular DeepL on the internet is free. I mean, it's free, but it's free because you're giving it, it's kind of a trade for your information. So the DeepL that we're paying for, did we pay $8,000 a year to have 4 users? That's not a lot. So that's the problem. And then I think to have 25 users was how much, Jerome? Like 25,000, like it was,
Yeah, I don't have the figures in front of me.
yeah, it was wild. So it's a
It's
very
limiting.
very limiting. Like
Yeah.
yeah, for how many, and then if we are going to pay for the more users, we want those users to have something that's even worth paying that much for. So a couple glossaries is, you know, maybe not worth the kind of money that they're asking for.
That makes a lot of sense. And it really does shed, again, just a lot of light on what some of the challenges are, that it's not just a question of, okay, we've accessed these records. Here they are, everybody. Like, it's not that simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we have time for one more question. So I'll just give your brains a little moment to percolate. Otherwise, we want to respect everyone's time. All right, we'll just see if any last minute urgent questions come. Great. So I'd just like to thank our 3 presenters today. This has been really wonderful. I think I'm actually just going to close or give my sort of final housekeeping moments before I turn it back over to Elder Larry for a closing prayer. So all of the housekeeping I have left is that the recording is already up on YouTube now, so you'll be able to find that. And our wonderful tech folk, Tessa and her team, have said that people who would like to access the PowerPoints themselves, those will be emailed out per your emails that you registered with on Zoom. So that said, thank you enormously, Jerome, Veronique, and Marie, for sharing about your work today. It's really been enlightening and helpful. Yeah, thanks to the team that organized this, particularly Trina. And thank you, Elder Larry, for being here with us today. If you would, could you close us out with some thoughts or a prayer?
Am I back on? Yes, I think so. Okay, just my thank you to the 3 presenters as well. Three very knowledgeable presenters, and think the information we got from that, it shows that there are difficulties in the work that you do in trying to interpret. I was listening to Anne-Marie and doing some of the interpretations and how some of the tools that you use out there still are not giving you the accurate interpretation when you're going from French to English. Yeah, you have very, very tough work, and yet you continue to do that. I think, Veronique, I just wanted to compliment you on your Cree. I think that was very good for someone who's not a Cree speaker. Very welcome. That was very good. A very good presentation. Jerome, again, intro and the difficulty in translating is out there. Some of the documents that you have to work with, the difficulty in reading some of that, even if it's especially the handwritten stuff. I was trying to read what was coming up as you were presenting. I'm going, luckily I'm not a French speaker, but at the same time, I do have I speak a Michif language, which is a combination of French nouns and Cree verbs. So I was looking for the French nouns and some of that there, and I'm going, I'm having a little difficulty here. I can imagine, what some others are going through. Anne-Marie, the difficulty in translations, as I was saying, when you went through that, yeah, use Deep L, sure, let's go with that. Let's go with the Pro Deep L or Deep L Pro. And hopefully as we continue to evolve in those areas, that it becomes easier for those who come behind you and want to do the similar work and working with First Nations people and transcribing all that information that's out there that we have difficulty in understanding. I appreciate the work that you do. I think that's how I want to summarize that, and I want to finish it off with a prayer in my language again, and just say thank you. I started to take my glasses off and realized I couldn't read my own writing, so I had to put my glasses back on. I usually take my rings off, my watch off, my glasses, and my hat to say a prayer, because then I'm letting the Great Spirit know that I come humbly to interpret what He's been trying to teach us. There we say, Nanas kumun nos kagisiga. Ipagtihtamuin tanto to o huta. Tapi Krishna hamaguya ko. Tapo yung Krishna hamagyo. Kasi kataya ko. Uya wo. Ogskihtamuin. Nstohtamuin. Imiguya ko. Nistanan tanto tamakiyag. Simanto. O chik siwatsi. Stem nanas ko. Kumagagisiga agutta. Ipagtihtamuin tanto tawago. Nanas ko. Which egoista o tatuskiwano. Apsis. Siagits. O 60 o isto. Stand na naskum. Eawa ko ibanagandi. Agaskita ko. Agaskita. Sige nagiwa. Ikuta. Pagsuntuan. Tuwa pinto kamangit siksimanto. Wisto mi. Gusto tamo. Great Spirit, I thank you today for these three that were able to give us the information, to give us some measure of understanding of the difficulties that are involved in the research that they do. Great Spirit, I thank you for giving us this opportunity to listen. And I ask those participants to accept and to understand and give them some measure of understanding of what it is like. For those who are working in the field out there, I'm sure that what was done today, Great Spirit, will help them to understand even more those things that we go through. Stand and ask them, hi.
Thank you again to everyone for coming. Ekose for those words, Elder Larry. Presenters, you've received a number of thanks in the chat, or in the Q&A rather. So thank you again for the sharing. And with that, thank you, and we'll see you all again. Good luck in your research.
It was
Thank you.